Good evening, Guyana, and welcome to Safe TV Channel 2 for another episode of A Change in Guyana, where the change you deserve begins with you. As always, we encourage you to call in at 218-4949 or 218-1890 to be part of the show and to have your personal questions answered. Tonight we have a special guest, Mike Singh. Mike is a globally respected telecoms consultant and an investor in the Indus Americas subsea cable system, otherwise known as BRICS cable. Mike holds a bachelor's degree in international relations and a master's degree in international economics. He is a visiting fellow at the world-renowned Nanyang Technological University of Singapore, the S.P. Jain Graduate School of Business in Dubai, and University of the Western Cape, South Africa. He also serves as the chairman of the IPv6 Council for Latin America and the Caribbean, vice chairman of the steering committee for the BRICS Cable Consortium, member of the board of advisors of the Smart Cities Council, and the global advisory board of Startup Village India. He is also a globally recognized thought leader and a regular presenter on issues of relevance to the global telecom sector with a special focus on mobile convergent communications growth in Latin America and the Caribbean, and Asia and Africa. Mike, welcome to the show. Wow, what an impressive bio. Your bio reflects the life of a man well-traveled. Where do you currently reside?
Well, good night and salam. First of all, thank you for having me here. I basically would say I've been living out of a suitcase for the last 10 years. I'm an American citizen, so America is my first home, and I like to think of the Middle East and India as my second homes. So I do spend quite a fair amount of time in the air between the US, Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. And of course now back home in Guyana.
Okay, thank you. You said you lived in Dubai. How long have you lived there?
Well, not to say Dubai, Abu Dhabi.
Okay.
I've been spending quite a considerable amount of time in and out of the United Arab Emirates since 2008, 2009. During the time I was in Afghanistan running the affairs of Afghan Wireless, I transited the UAE, spent a lot of time in and out. So for at least the last 10 years, I'd say I've spent more time there than any given point.
I see, I see. There are two positions you hold that I feel are relevant to tonight's discussions. On the advisory board of the Smart Cities Council and the Startup Village India. Can you share with us what you have done with those organizations?
Certainly. The Smart Cities Council is a public-private partnership. It's a grouping of many of the world's leading technology companies working together in unison to look at ways of solving the developmental challenges in an interconnected society. The Smart Cities Councils will have companies such as GE, Siemens, Google, Bechtel, Philips, Comcast, Amazon, you name it, the top companies on the NASDAQ in the area of physical infrastructure, in the area of innovation, in the area of mobile technology, social entrepreneurship, social media, have all come together to work in unison at finding ways of helping us to adapt to the changing realities and of the 21st century, and also in helping cities and governments and countries around the world to take advantage of a borderless world where technology dictates if you lose or if you snooze, you lose, and basically to ensure you're ready for the information-driven economy, the era of the knowledge worker. In the context of India, Startup Village India, I was instrumental in launching that in the state of Kerala as India's response to Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley today is facing a talent crunch, a talent shortage. India no longer has a brain drain, India has a brain gain. Because a lot of the Indians who have worked and lived and what have you in Silicon Valley, where they have amassed a lot of knowledge, a lot of money, and you can see from the likes of Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft. These are just some of the people of Indian origin that we have today in the Valley running some of the largest tech companies. But they are not depending on the Valley. The second and third tier Indians who have worked, who have studied in the US, first of all, at Ivy League schools, and such as Carnegie Mellon or Stanford or at Wharton or at University of Texas, Austin, have now gone on to work in the Silicon Valley. They've gotten the US experience, they have access to knowledge, credit, capital, and I named two of them. Vivek Wadhwa, who is a very close friend of mine and a mentor in many ways. The other will be Vinod Khosla, one of the early co-founders and investors in Google and in Facebook and in companies such as Jawbone and Ring Central. They are now taking their money, putting it back into India, and all the Indians who've studied at the Ivy League schools are not staying in Silicon Valley. They're going back to India because India represents a significant opportunity of almost 1.5 billion people speaking English, a middle class of almost 1 billion, and the average age of people in India is between 18 and 27. So you have a large consumer class. So we in India got together. When I say we, I mean the federal government of India, the state government of Kerala, Chris Gopalakrishnan, who is one of the co-founders of Infosys, which gives IBM a run for its money. And we felt, rather than Indians leaving India and going abroad, let's create the enabling environment in India where they can get access to capital and they can get mentorship and they can develop the ideas and everything that they've got in India, and that way take advantage of their local market and then expand across the world. Because if they step into the West and they don't own that intellectual capital, they will be selling themselves short. The next Google, the next Microsoft will not come from the West. It will come from India.
I see. I see something similar happened here in Guyana, where a lot of people who were qualified educationally left. If you travel around the Caribbean, you run into a lot of people who were teachers in other islands that actually obtained their education in Guyana. So I guess it's significant for Guyanese as a whole to look at that phenomenon and try to understand why it's important to come back home, why it's important to at least remain here in some cases, to help this country develop. Because again, the changes are coming, and the changes that are coming requires a lot of technological skills and backgrounds and experience. So as you said, I think we need to look at brain gain as opposed to brain drain. The United Arab Emirates developed significantly over a short period of time. What would you contribute that development to?
4 things. First of all, the founding father of the UAE, the late His Royal Highness Sheikh Zayed, Baba Zayed, was a Bedouin. He came from the desert, and in the late 1950s, when the first oil and gas wells were dug in Abu Dhabi, he said very clearly, this is just a vehicle to the future. One day, this thing in the ground will run out. What are we going to do when oil and gas that we have here finishes, are we going to go back to the desert? Are we going to go back being date farmers and pearl divers? Or would we have used the proceeds of oil and gas to chart a sustainable future to the 21st century? So it begins first with the vision. You've got to have a leader that has this vision, not for himself, but for his people and where they intend to be 50 years from now. That was the first thing. He was a visionary. He had never gone to a university. He had never gone to any colleges. But this was a man who was pragmatic. In fact, I like to tell the story that when he went in the 60s at the invitation of the late French President Charles de Gaulle, Sheikh Zayed visited the Renault factory where they were making cars. And he said in Arabic to one of his advisors, look, the man is operating this machine that's making the cars. Of course, he came from a society of camels. But here he was, quite interested in the role industrialization was playing in the post-war development and recovery of France. The second place he went was to the Sorbonne University in Paris. And he looked around and he marveled. And he said, books, lots of books. We must have this in Abu Dhabi. That was in the 60s. Today, in Abu Dhabi, we have a campus of the Sorbonne University because the founding father said, we must have this in Abu Dhabi. And this was in the 60s. This is 2018. 5 years ago, or a little more, we built a campus of the Sorbonne in Abu Dhabi. The second thing was, Sheikh Zayed believed in the promise of youth. He believed that the future of the country rested squarely on investing in people. And this investment was not to give them a Ferrari. That investment was to give them education. So he set out a national plan where they started making it compulsory for everyone to go to school. Started national housing campaigns, massive infrastructure investments, roads, ports, you name it. With all this oil wealth that was coming in, he wanted to ensure that every Emirati had the same equal opportunity to health care, to education, to good roads, functional water supply. The building blocks was infrastructure. So it was the vision, the infrastructure, and education. The third thing, he held people accountable. He did not care if you were his brother. If you were given a task and you messed up, you could not call an uncle or an auntie to get you out. You were held accountable. And fourthly, he had a great passion for seeing things through. He was not afraid to make decisions. And once he took a decision, they stuck to it. They had a vision. They had a clear commitment. We're going to get from point A to point B. And come hell or high water, we are going to get there. 2018, I am proud to see my friends in Abu Dhabi rushing towards Mars. We are going to get the first mission to Mars, is inshallah, by 2021. United Arab Emirates also intends to colonize Mars. But the first unmanned mission is expected to get there by 2021. In 2020, we welcomed the world to Dubai for the Dubai Expo. So it all starts with having leaders that are of integrity, they're committed, and who are willing to understand that this oil and gas is temporary. You must invest in education and infrastructure, because with that, your people can now move towards entrepreneurship. They can move towards economic diversification and innovation. And when I talk about diversification and innovation, I will want to talk about the downstream and midstream industries of the oil and gas sector, which Guyana should be capitalizing on.
Before we do that, now let's take this back to Guyana. How do you find Guyana's development since independence? So that we can then compare that to where we need to go in the future.
Guyana is about the same situation we had, perhaps a little better than the UAE. The first hospital in the United Arab Emirates was built in Abu Dhabi in about the very early 70s. UAE they came together as a federation in 1971, but the first hospital was just built a few months after that. Ghana's development since independence has been one of arrested development because of the politics of independence from about post-independence, 75 to 85. This country went through hell with the socialist policies, import substitution, massive brain drain. It was an unfortunate period, but Guyana had become victim of the OPEC oil crisis. The very thing that we are beating our chest about is what messed us up in the 70s. Guyana could not possibly maintain the large expenses associated with fossil fuel imports. And in an attempt to conserve whatever little resources we had, I think President Burnham at the time had to embark on this policy of import substitution and what have you. And I'm not here to defend his record, but there was something good Forbes Burnham did, and that was free education, which I benefited from. But from about the 70s to now, we have lost. The best and brightest have left this country.
What do you think our greatest challenge is?
It's human capital.
And how do you see us closing that gap?
We must become our brother's keeper. Irrespective if we are Guyanese here or we're Guyanese in the diaspora, we must come together as one people and understand that we all have a vested interest. We are all cut from the same cloth in this country. We are all Guyanese, whether from the Punta Playa and the winey there to the very bottom of, in the Kanuku Mountains, or, Conishan and these places way down there. And we must stop this bickering. We must come together. Without the diaspora, there'll be no remittances, and this economy would have collapsed a long time ago. The diaspora brings a lot to the table: access to credit, technology, education, good training, global best practices, and this should be seen as a blessing. If we can bring our local brothers and sisters who have left back home, by all means, charity begins at home. It's better to let them get a piece of this pie than us having to import people from Bangladesh, Pakistan, and elsewhere. And let me add, can we produce enough welders and fabricators to compete in this oil and gas sector? No. It will take us at least 15 years to get to where the UAE got to in 5 or 10. And what we should focus on is developing the skills and the qualifications to manage the oil and gas sector, similar to what was done in the United Arab Emirates through a process known as Emiratization. And I say this should include Guyanese holding 51% ownership in all companies when we talk about local content, because that's the law in the UAE and in Qatar and in Saudi Arabia, Bahrain and Kuwait and Oman.
I see. Looking at our land situation, we've got quite a bit of land, and yet we've got people squatting. There are thousands of Guyanese squatting, and I kind of equate this to being thirsty while at sea.
Mm-hmm.
How do we solve this phenomenon?
Well, first of all, if someone has title to a land, we must respect private ownership of property. It is illegal to go and squat on someone's land. If they gave you permission for temporary occupation of the land, it's different, and that should be given in writing. But to just go and squat on land, it's unacceptable, because you're creating the precedence for what I call chaotic development. A case in point, it's folks squatting along the reserves for the Guyana Water Inc. I remember reading 2 months ago, the Guyana GWI was forced to take some drastic actions to fence it off, and I agree with them, they should. You can't have persons taking up permanent residency on the boundaries or the reserves of the water supply. I mean, that's where we get our water, and we don't know how they're taking a dump in there and contributing, to messing up the water supply that serves the city. This is something for the Ministry of, the Central Housing and Planning Authority, and I put a big shout out there to Mr. Saul. Think he's doing a good job. Albeit sometimes not popular, but the various regions, the various municipalities, and the Central Housing and Planning Authority, which comes on, I believe, Ministry of Communities, must work together to regulate this. We do not want to have persons just throwing up shacks and what have you in every nook and cranny of this country. We've got to have some orderly development. And if this means meeting with residents, helping them to find alternative places where they can take up residence, we must do it. It's a humane thing to do. Feed, clothe, and house the nation was something we've been pursuing since 1975, 1976. And this is a large country with a lot of land. So no Guyanese should be living without proper shelter. And I think the government, in fairness of the day, has been really working hard in many areas to try and bring some order to the chaos that existed prior to 2015.
I see. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
I know that will help. I mean, everyone needs a place to live. So
yes.
I think that is critical that we try to resolve that issue first. For future development, what are the kind of skills you think Guyanese need to obtain now so that they can be better equipped to handle what's coming in the oil and gas industry?
First of all, we need to understand you can only have so many lawyers, so many accountants, and so many left-wing economists. We need to focus on the STEM. And I salute persons like Karen Abrams from Atlanta, the Office of the First Lady, and UG, which has been promulgating this, science, technology, engineering, and math. The focus must be on science, on technology, on engineering, and math. Math, is the queen of all subjects, and it's work. You need to know math if you're going to succeed in science. So people need to be encouraged to take up careers and vocations in the areas of science and technology. It's very important because that's where the world is, and that's where it's going to continue to be with artificial intelligence, the knowledge-based economy, machine learning, and of course, my favorite topic, the fourth industrial revolution. And that's all, built around algorithms and machine learning. So science is important. If you don't have a society or a country that's geared towards STEM, you're going to miss the boat. In fact, I would like to propose we build something such as a Center for Leadership, Entrepreneurship, Technology, and Innovation. That's my plan for Guyana, where any Guyanese, irrespective of race, color, creed, or class, once you have the prerequisite academic entry requirements, you can attend for free. And if you're from out of town, from regions 1, 2, 9, 8, what have you, 7, you are allowed to stay for free accommodation.
I see.
And free food. We can do it.
I think a lot of the programs you're looking at are focused mainly at younger people. But it seems as though there's a preoccupation by this current government to source assistance by age. I believe, just me personally speaking, I believe it's kind of short-sighted. I think we have a large population of younger people who should be driving the development that's coming, and the development that is part of what we need to be doing. What is your view on that? Because I heard you mention earlier, India has this very large youth population that's now coming into the leadership age. How do you feel about that here in Guyana?
Youth is a blessing, and it's very important that we recognize the future doesn't belong to old people, it belongs to young people. Let me ask, how old was Mr. Muhammad Ali when he died? Would you, let's say you put Muhammad Ali in the ring with Mike Tyson, who would you bet on? When you reach a certain age, I'm not saying old people are stupid or they have no value. They can take on the role of helping young people, guiding them. But a man or woman in the 70s don't have the same drive of someone in their 18, 19, or 20, unless you're ingesting like a gallon worth of acai every day. So you've got to involve young people. I'm not against old people by any means. I believe I don't believe in age discrimination. If an older person can do the job, by all means. But you must also make space for the young.
I noticed you're wearing a pin on your right lapel. What is the purpose of that pin?
Oh, this. This is the pin of the Royal Court of the UAE. This is the official emblem worn by select members of the Royal Courts of the United Arab Emirates. It was given to me as a token of lifelong appreciation and friendship by a certain member of the senior member of the royal family of the Al Nahyans of Abu Dhabi.
I see. Congrats.
Thank you.
I think that brings us to the end of tonight's show, Mike. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for sharing the knowledge you've shared with us. Again, to the listening audience, please feel free to join us here again next Wednesday for another episode of A Change in Guyana, where the change you deserve begins with you. Thank you for joining us. Have a good night. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Yes.